BLUF Gaming here with a 6 belt balancer for Factorio 0.15x. This balancer will take any number of items coming in the 6 incoming belts and balance it out for you in the 6 outgoing belts. It'll do so by drawing the same amount from all lanes when possible, but if you have an uneven load, it will balance that out in the export. That way you can make sure that you have a nice even load going to wherever you need to send this. Being 6 lanes wide, obviously this is for high throughput bases. It will probably only be needed in some mega base projects. Because trains can only be accessed by 6 inserters, that is the most likely place you'll have a use for this. If you'd like to see us build this from the ground up and learn exactly how it works, we're going to cover every last bit of this in the rest of the video. Okay, let's go ahead and build this monstrosity from the ground up, and believe it or not, actually try to understand how it works. We're going to start with 6 incoming belts. There we go. And as is the case with almost every design we have, immediately cap all the belts with splitters. Next, we're going to work from left to right, and we're going to deal with the largest portions to begin with, and if that doesn't make sense now, it will soon. We're going to take this underground belt and skip 4 spaces, and then this one and skip 1 space. Up here, we're going to split it, and then here we're going to start our 6 output lanes. We can go ahead and mark all those with splitters. Good. Now, to finish this one off, let's go ahead, follow the belt out, split it again, and then each side of this belt we're going to send to each one of these splitters. Just like that. And for the time being, that's going to be all we do with these 2 belts. Next, let's go to the center splitter. First, we're going to go through this hole, put up a splitter, and now we're going to loop around and send what comes out of that splitter here to this splitter. And now we need to make sure that this belt goes to each of these 2. We're going to do that first by giving it a splitter, and then sending up another underground belt that skips 4. Finally, we're going to cover this last splitter here. We're going to make a left turn here, and we're not going to skip 4 this time, we're just going to skip 3. And then here, we're going to go back to our skipping of 4 and go right there. Finally, we need to address this part of the splitter here. This is a shared area used by all of the incoming splitters once you account for what's coming in on this splitter. Our final underground belt will connect this direction, and just as is the case with so many of our balancers, this will be a recycler. And we're done. So what's happening? Well, let's take a look. To begin with, I'm just going to talk in 8ths. Each one of these splitters with their original load is going to send 1/8 of their entire load to each of these individual belts. So let's see how that happens from the left to the right. Starting here, we have 2 belts coming in, and if we just talk in terms of this splitter, we have half here and half here. So this is getting half, which it splits into a quarter and a quarter. This quarter gets split into an 1/8 and an 1/8. So this splitter has already sent its 1/8 up here. What about the other 4? It's sending half here, which gets split into a quarter and a quarter, which hits these splitters and it gets turned into an 1/8 and an 1/8. or an eighth and an eighth. So this splitter has sent 1/8 to 6 lanes, or 6/8, or 3/4, however you like your fractions. Let's make sure the other two are doing the same. This splitter sends half of everything it has here, and from here it sends 1/4 here, which gets split into an eighth and an eighth. On this side it sends half here, which will be 1/4 going onto this belt, which turns into 1/8 and 1/8, and will also be 1/4 going into this belt, 1/8 on each. Finally, we have this splitter. It's using the same process as this splitter to get to the right 4 lanes. It sends a half here, 1/4 to each of these belts, which gets split into an eighth 4 times. The other half comes over here, gets split into 1/4 and 1/4, and this 1/4 comes up and is split into 1/8 each. So, all 3 of these splitters have sent 1/8 of the entire load to each of these 6 belts. We've accounted for 6/8 or 3/4 of everything that's come in so far. So what happened to the other 1/4 that's missing? Well, it wasn't on this belt, but here we have a bit of it coming over here. How about this one? It wasn't this direction, but over here we had 1/4 coming up here to this splitter. And the same is true for this one. It came through this splitter. So this splitter sent 1/4 of everything it sees out right here, and these 2 splitters sent 1/4 of everything they see out through here. Can you see that those 3 1/4 from each splitter, or 1/4 of the entire load, are all going into the same splitter? So what's this splitter doing with it? Well, it halves it, and it sends part of it to here to split evenly amongst all of these 4, and the other half it sends to this splitter, where it gets up in these 2 and recycled again. So we think just about the 1/4 coming into this splitter, before any amount of it gets to an end lane, it has to go through exactly 2 splitters. This splitter and then one of these 2, or this splitter and then this one. Every time. So that's going to be an even distribution of everything that comes out of this splitter. It will miss some, and it will come through here, but all of these go through the same process again, as is the case with all of the recyclers that we've had in all of our designs. In the end, we end up with a perfectly distributed, even load coming in the outgoing lanes, and it treats all the incoming lanes evenly, that way you don't have to worry about backups. This is by far the most complicated design we've done yet, and in my planned series on belt balancers, this is the most complicated one I expect to do. There isn't a lot of use for any larger number of belts, but if I do get some special requests for designs that haven't been covered in my series, I can come back and cover those later. If this one is too wide for you, being 9 wide, you can lengthen this out far enough that you can wrap some of these parts back in the center and make it only 6 wide. However, that is a very long design, so make sure you have plenty of room before you attempt it. Now, before we go on to the next series, we want to make sure that this huge monstrosity actually works as advertised. So hold tight, I'll be right back with some goods ready to go. Alright, here we go, the grand finale. Let's see it work. As is the case with all of the balancers in this series, if you have different items in the left and the right lanes of each belt, that segregation will be maintained in the outgoing belts. As you can see, we have a perfectly even distribution of items coming out in the 6 exit lanes, and it operated quite quickly. Now, because we only jumped 4 spaces at most with any of these belts, and you might have been wondering why I kept stressing it was 4 spaces with all of them and 3 with this one and only 2 with that one, well, that's because yellow underground belts can only skip 4 spaces altogether. In other words, if you want to build this with yellow belts, you can. You can also build it with blue belts in case you need to move things through more quickly. I don't think you'll have a lot of use for this design But because trains can only be accessed by 6 inserters per side of a car, it's quite common to end up with 6 belts of a good that you're trying to get away from a depot. If you're dealing with a very large base, or with a very large train depot that needs a very high throughput so that the next trains can come through, you may find yourself needing this design. Just make sure you get far enough away from the depot before you build the balancer, so that way this extra 3 on the side doesn't get in the way. If you're willing to go with fewer than 6 belts in the output, you can actually put your balancers right next to the train, as some of them are only 7 wide. However, there are times when we're building a mega base and we really need the most speed possible, and this is exactly what you need if you're dealing with a mega base with a lot of trains. Well, engineers, I've really enjoyed making this series, and this is my first series on YouTube, so it's taken me a while to sort of get the hang of how this works. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and if you click subscribe, you'll be sure to see whenever I have more videos coming out. I expect to cover trains next, and after that, I'll go further in depth in Factorio. Comment if you have any special requests, and I'll try to get a video made as soon as possible. That's all for now, engineers, and I hope to see you next time.